Welcome to the Wellness Collective. We are excited to have as our featured guest expert, Dr. Tara Brach. Tara is an internationally known teacher and author of mindfulness, meditation, emotional healing, and spiritual awakening. Recognized as one of the leading teachers of mindfulness, she offers a wise and caring approach to freeing ourselves and society from suffering. Tara will present an introduction to mindfulness. I think it's important to mention that Tara has been an advocate for people of color in the mindfulness community. And I'm also proud to say she is my teacher and my friend. Welcome, Tara.
And all of you, I have incredible respect and warmth towards Dean Richardson, and also appreciation, Ms. Rodwell, Mr. Deller, and all those who manifested this. It's such a cool offering. And I'm particularly feeling this resonance of being together right in the midst of our crazy, hurting world. I know for some, there may be some uplift right these moments, and also how many of us are so distressed at the dividedness, the hatred, how many people are living in these different realities from each other. So what I'd like to do in our time together is look at how we can awaken our heart and our spirit in the midst of stress. And we'll look at the role of mindfulness. And I thought I'd let you know one of my favorite cartoons is a bunch of monks. They're demonstrating on the National Mall. And one's got the bullhorn and he's saying, what do we want? The others are going, mindfulness. And when do we want it? Now. It's the American version of mindfulness. And, we have such a desperate need for a more mindful, compassionate world. Probably this last year, few have experienced so many layers of difficulty, the trauma that's really society-wide, the hatred, the cracking open of the virulence of racism apparent to so many now, the pandemic, unemployment, climate change. So, and these are all on top of what each of us is carrying in our individual lives and our relationships, work, school, family. So what I'm going to do is invite you to sense where you're feeling most challenged or reactive right now, where you get most triggered. And I'm going to introduce the most powerful mindfulness tool I know. It's an acronym, RAIN. And we'll actually practice together some as part of this. But first, I thought I'd begin by sharing a story that really has touched me. It's this old temple in Thailand, and there's this huge, for years and years, actually a couple centuries, there was this enormous clay statue of the Buddha, and it was repainted and cared for over the years. People really cherished it, but it was not handsome. It was not a refined looking bit of Buddhist art. But it just lasted through great storms and invading armies and changes of government. And in recent years, there was a crack that kind of appeared and it got bigger. And so one of the head monks one night took a flashlight to peer inside to look at the infrastructure that might be there. And what beamed out was the shine of gold. And so they started taking off what turned out to be covering. It was the largest and is the largest solid gold statue of the Buddha in Southeast Asia. But here's what's interesting. The monks believed that this work of art had been covered over with plaster and clay during really difficult times of conflict. And that in a similar way, each of us covers over our innate purity. Just to deal with a difficult world, we cover over with our defenses and our aggression just to make it through. And when we do that, we forget our essential nature. We forget that tenderheartedness. We lose touch with our natural creativity and intelligence. So the real teaching here is that when we're stressed, we forget the gold. We forget who we are. We get identified in a very small reactive part of who we are. And brain science actually shows us what's happening during those times. It's so interesting to me that when we're triggered, let's say somebody says something critical or we're in an overwhelming situation, our more recently evolved part of our brain, the frontal cortex, quiets down and our limbic system, our survival brain, takes over, which means that we're really being run by fear. And we lose contact with our capacity to really reason. We lose contact with our empathy, with our mindfulness, with our creativity, with our heart. And I'm sure you can look at your own life and say, oh, yeah, I see where that happens. I know for me, and I call it a limbic trance. I'm kind of operating out of a very suboptimal personality or part of myself. So this happens to us and we know it. And the big question is, when we get disconnected, when we get angry and start lashing out, or when we made a mistake and then we turn on ourselves and get insecure, or when we're entering a situation that feels threatening or overwhelming, instead of getting hijacked by our limbic system, how do we regain access to our real resourcefulness, our resilience, our intelligence, our kindness? And I'll name 3 ways that we get that are most a great signal for when you know you're in that limbic trance. And one of them is when your mind starts getting into that anxious, obsessive thinking. We get caught in that inner narrative. I think of this other cartoon I saw of a man, he's driving on a long straight highway and it's entering a desert. And the sign is, you and your own tedious thoughts next 200 miles. And it's like that, we're just stuck with our worries and our plans and our anxious thinking. So that's one of the flags of a limbic trance. The second, we turn on ourselves. And I want to take some moments with this because I think probably most of you are familiar that the deepest suffering is feeling that we're unworthy, that we're failing, that we're not good enough. And it's pervasive in this society. And of course, it gets much more intensified by a society that has a racial caste system and a class caste system, because then all these messages are coming through the caste system in a systemic way of you're inferior for those in the non-dominant positions. So between our parents and our society, it's very, very common and pervasive to feel like, it's what I call the trance of unworthiness, to feel like we're failing. One woman was with her mother while her mother was dying, and her mother came out of a coma. She looked her straight in the eye and she said, all my life I thought something was wrong with me. And then she closed her eyes and she died. And those were the last words she said. And for this woman, it was like, wow. In a way, it was a gift to see, to get the tragedy of that we can go through so much of our life with that undercurrent of feeling like something's wrong with us. And how much that prevents us from taking risks or feeling like we can be intimate with others. So the survival brain tells us something's wrong. That's the function of the survival brain. It's looking for what's wrong. It's called the negativity bias. And then we add on, us humans add on to that, something's wrong with me. And that's really a prison. So that is the second flag I'm going to name of being in a limbic trance. And the third flag, you can probably guess this, is when we are blaming and angry and in conflict with others. When life's not going our way, we tend to make others wrong. We blame others. And it often circles around some belief that they're not agreeing with us on. There's a saying that the world is divided into those who think they're right. And that's the whole saying. And by way of example, a story, a little girl asked her mother how the human race appeared. And the mother answered, well, God made Adam and Eve, and they had children, so the whole of mankind was made. 2 days later, she asked her father the same question. He said, well, many years ago, there were monkeys, and the human race evolved from monkeys. She's totally confused. She goes to her mom again and says, Mom, how is it possible that you said the human race was created by God, and Dad said that we developed from monkeys? And the mother answered, well, dear, it's very simple. I told you about my side of the family, and he told you about his. And so there we have it, that we just think we're right. And no matter how right we are, when we're locked into thinking we're right and that the other is wrong, we're again in a trance. Any rigidity, any inflexibility, we're in a trance. So these are 3 signs: the anxious thinking, the harsh self-judgment, and the locking into blame of others. And often what happens is when it's the fear that's living in us is very raw, we will depress a lot of our feelings. And that's another sign of really being numb, disconnected. I want to share with you that a friend of mine's a palliative caregiver, and she has been with thousands of people when they've been dying. And she said the greatest regret of the dying was, I didn't live true to myself. I lived according to others' expectations, according to others' judgments of me or my own judgments of me. I lived according to society's ideas about how things should be, but I didn't live true to myself. And in a way, what that's saying is, I didn't live true to the gold. I forgot the gold. I forgot who I really was. This is the greatest regret of the dying. And yet we don't have to wait till we're dying to say, what does it really mean? I mean, you might ask yourself that. Just today, what would it mean to be living true to yourself? And when we get caught in the trance, when we get reactive, how do we come back to our best self? So that's where we're looking right now. And the acronym RAIN is a weave of mindfulness and compassion that can help us shift from being reactive to being at home, back connected with the gold, so we can respond to the world from who we really are. And by way of example, first, the acronym is R for recognize, A for allow, I for investigate, and N for nurture. Recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. And I'm going to give you an example, talk a little more, and then we're going to practice it together. Okay? So by way of example, this is a woman I worked with years ago when I was active as a clinical psychologist. Her daughter was senior year of high school. Grades were going south. She was smoking a lot of pot. She was just, she was just kind of in one of those completely pulling away and into herself and into her friends and not taking on any of the normal responsibilities. Her mother was freaked out. She was really angry at her daughter. And anytime they talked, that anger came through, so they barely talked. She came to me and wanted to say, and said, how am I going to deal with this? So we did RAIN with the anger. And the first step of RAIN is just to recognize what's going on. So recognize, it helps when you recognize, when you practice this, to mentally whisper the word of what's going on. And there may be a few things, you pick the most dominant. So for her, it was anger. And then the A is allow. And that's really not so easy, but it's really powerful. It's like taking a pause and saying, okay, I might not like this, but this is what's happening right now. So you're just honoring reality. You're not fighting it. You're letting the feeling be there. I often, with allow, just say, this belongs. It's like a wave in the ocean. It's here right now. It's not going to keep being here, but it belongs this moment. That gives a little space to investigate the eye of rain. And for her, she started investigating, and you have to feel it in your body. Investigate means come into the body. It's not cognitive. It's not, well, I'm angry because my father treated me this way. It's not that. Investigate means you feel somatically what's going on in your body, because our issues are in our tissues. So she found in her body, she started feeling that swell and that heat of anger. And when she started getting in touch with it, she could feel under it, there was really fear. She was afraid her daughter was going to have a bad life, that she was going to fail, that things were going to go really wrong for her. And when she started opening to that, she started feeling her own sense of failure. Well, she's like this because I wasn't being a good mother. And so often, if we start investigating, we can find in the layers that we've turned on ourselves. And when I asked her how long she had felt like she was falling short, she said, all my life. And it's kind of that perspective, it brings up what I call a soul sadness sometimes, when we realize how many moments of our life we've been turned on ourselves. And that's when she started tearing up. And that's when we went into nurture, which was, and I asked her, and I often do, to put her hand on her heart and just feel the grief that was there, and the feelings of falling short and the concerns for her daughter, and just send a message to herself from her high self, from her most awake heart. And she just told herself to trust her goodness, to trust her heart. And she could feel a calming down, and she could feel an opening up. And that's the period that I call after the rain. And just like with a real rain, it nourishes the earth, but then it's after the rain that things blossom. When you're doing rain, don't skip over after the rain, because there's a shift. And when you get familiar with it, it will keep drawing you back to a more expanded sense of self. So for her, the shift was feeling just more open-hearted, more of a space of tenderness and kindness. And it carried over the next weeks, that when she was with her daughter, rather than leading with anger, she led with more curiosity, like, what's life like for you? What's going on? And that started allowing them to connect. Now, I just want to say that when you practice rain, it's never a one shot, especially when the issue's really sticky. It took us years to build our patterns, and so we undo our patterns over time. But each time you'll feel a little bit of that shift in after the rain, especially in times of crisis or when we're really feeling hijacked. We need an easy to remember tool to bring us back online again, reconnect us with who we can be. Now, for some things that are not so intense, you can do what I call a light rain. And it might just take a minute or two. You just say, oops, nervous. Okay, let it be there. Breathe with it, feel it. It's okay. Send a message of nurturing, and you'll just feel a little more space. You'll have interrupted an old pattern. And it becomes more natural and spontaneous as you do it. If you're drawn to deepening your practice in this, my book, Radical Compassion, is a guide in bringing rain to a whole range of emotions. So you can check that out if you'd like. And there's a lot of free material on my website on rain. Now, when we bring rain to our own inner life, it then allows us to be with others in a different way. We actually connect with others in a different way. Our suffering is when we forget our belonging to ourselves and to each other. And so it's a critical thing at this time in the history of our world that we reconnect and belong to our inner life and then widen the circles. Really, the medicine for our world is that we all widen the circles of compassion. And it's difficult when others are acting in ways that feel threatening. And so we have to have our boundaries. Anger is intelligent. We need anger to activate. But ultimately, one of my teachers says, we want a heart that can include everyone. The late John Lewis put it this way. He said, the way of love and nonviolence is the more excellent way. And that's what RAIN trains us in. It trains us to open to what's going on and be able to nurture our own selves so that we can be more open-hearted with others. There was a lieutenant in the Army who took a training in anger management, and it had a lot of mindfulness in it. And one day he was at a supermarket, and he got in line, a huge amount of stuff in his cart, and the woman in front of him only had one item, but she wasn't in the express line. She was in his line. So his anger just started flooding him. And he went and he reminded himself, oh yeah, mindfulness. That's, the recognizing he was in a trance. And he named it anger, just come back, feel it, breathe, feel it in his body. It's okay. Put the hand on he didn't put his hand on his heart, but just sending the message, it's okay, calm down. Well, when the woman was gone, she had checked out, he turned to the clerk and said, that little girl was really cute, because the woman not only had her just a few items in her cart, but she'd had a little girl, and they were oohing and ahhing. That was part of why he got so angry over this little girl. So when they left, he said, that little girl was really cute. And the clerk said, oh, actually, she's my little girl. That was my mother. And my husband was killed in Afghanistan. And so my mom brings her over a couple of times a day so I can be with her. If he hadn't paused and done some mindfulness and compassion, he might have said something or been rude. And for so many of us, we react. And there's often for another person, when they're behaving in ways we don't like, they're hurting in some way. It's one of my teachers that I honor so much, Ruby Sales. She's a theologian and a civil rights activist. Her guiding inquiry is and she says this has changed her social justice work, is when she sees someone to ask the question, where does it hurt? So we need to do that more with ourselves and with each other. As one person said, we need to be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. So my friends, let's practice a light rain just so you get a taste of it. And then if you find it value, as I mentioned, I have a lot of more extended rain meditations on my website and in the book. So you might pick something. You might close your eyes and take a few full breaths. And scan your life and bring to mind something that's going on that brings up some reactivity, but not traumatic reactivity. You don't have time for that right this moment. There might be some worry about another person, some annoyance with how another person's behaving, some way that you're down on yourself. You might visualize a situation that brings it up. So right to the point where you get triggered, just imagine that. So you're trying to sense, what's it really like when you get triggered? And you might sense what's the worst part of it. Imagine getting triggered. And what's really most bothering you? What makes you angry or anxious, upset? And you begin the R of rain by naming whatever feeling is strongest. Is it fear, worry, anxiety, anger? You might whisper it either out loud or to yourself. And then allow it to be there. You can explore saying, okay, this belongs for now. Or just let it be. And begin to investigate. Again, sensing the worst part of it, what's really upsetting. What do you think is going to happen that's so bad? What's going to go wrong? And then feel in your body. Where do you feel it the most? Is it your throat, chest, your belly? When you're upset, what are you feeling? Just to feel it in your body. And you might, right at this point, explore. And if you've never done this before, it's so powerful. Just to put your hand on your heart, just gently. And you're beginning to accompany what you're feeling. You're being with yourself. We don't usually do that. We're usually in too much reactivity. So you're feeling it. You're feeling what you're upset about. Give that part of you that's upset permission to really express what it's feeling. It's like you're asking that question, where does it hurt? And you might sense what the part of you that's upset most needs. Really, if it could have any sort of comfort, would it be feeling forgiven or understood, accepted, loved, embraced? And you can nurture yourself. You can sense your most high self, your most awake, wise heart, sending a message of care to this part of you. And just experiment with that. Just whispering a caring message. It could be simply, it's okay, or you're enough. You're enough. Trust yourself. Or you might find your own wise heart saying, I'm here and I'm not leaving. Or if there's fear, you might say, thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm okay right now. Or you might say, you're held in love. And let the caring in. Just let it in. Let it wash through you. Just as a rain can drench the ground and nourish the plants, let the caring wash through you. Just feel the warmth, the care. And you might take a few full breaths and sense what shifted, even if just a tiny bit, that there's a little more presence. A little more presence, a little more heart space. And the heart space, that care, that compassion is what you can bring into the world. It's like the writer L.R. Noce says, do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break and all things can be mended. Not with time, as they say, but with intention. So go, love intentionally. The broken world waits in darkness for the light that is you. Thank you, friends, for your time and your attention. And thank you, Dean Richardson, for including me and inviting me here.
In my tradition, we say, "Amen." It is so. Powerful, and looking forward to your next visit to Howard University.
It would be my pleasure. I accept in advance.
Great. God bless. Take care, everyone.